Wonderful. I'm Dr. Jennifer Williams, and welcome to our very first in the series of trauma responsive webinars here at Barry University School of Social Work. Before we begin, and I see lots of people coming in, I really want to express how really thrilled we are by the overwhelming interest that we've had in this series. It really is truly inspiring to see so many dedicated clinicians eager to just delve into these strategies, like the ones that we're going to be discussing today and throughout the series. So today we're here for a 1-hour webinar on strategies to help clients develop psychological flexibility for resilience. I'm going to share with you our PowerPoint and then introduce a couple of people here. So give me just a second. Yes. Okay. Just a second, folks. Okay. Is everybody able to see? We're able to see
Looks
that?
great.
Looks great. Okay. Wonderful. Let's see here. All right. So we want to talk a little bit about this series first before I go and introduce a couple of people. What this series is it's designed to help clinicians, to provide clinicians with real practical insights that are evidence-informed techniques and resources to help elevate your skills and hopefully inspire real transformative outcomes for your clients. So we posted on here what the upcoming webinars are that we have here. We'll get back to this in just a second. I'm really excited, folks, to share with you a little bit about our school's trauma-informed social work education. I see a lot of alumni on here. Welcome. I see. So nice to see you folks coming back and being a part of this. Our School of Social Work has a trauma-informed education, and it really is truly transformative. What makes the DSW, the doctoral program that we have, unique is that it has an integration of neuro-informed and trauma-responsive approaches. And that's what we're going to be exploring deeply throughout this series. So I'm joined today with my colleague and the co-developer of this series, Dr. Ashley Austin. And Ashley, would you like to say a few things?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. Super happy to have so many folks joining us today, and honestly super excited to be doing this series. Jen and I have spent a lot of time sort of brainstorming and thinking about the things that we'd like to talk about, and the sort of having our own sort of, I don't know, coffee talks around trauma. And we thought this would be a neat way to be able to share some of our the things that have come out of our chats with the rest of our community of trauma providers in the South Florida area, across the states, possibly across the globe. Happy to have everyone here. My bio is up there. Definitely not going to read it for you. You're welcome to read it or ignore it. I would like to say Happy Pride, because there is a little piece in there. I do a lot of my work around trauma work, as well as working with marginalized populations focused on the trans and non-binary community, as well as others. So you'll see that. Just wanted to sort of orient you to a couple of the things that we're going to be doing here. I'm going to talk a lot and fast, and I know some of you I could see in the participants, you know me already, and so I talk a lot and fast, but I'm going to do it like really short, and then you're not going to hear from me today. But what we're doing in this series is sort of we're sort of developing different ways to present this material. And today, Jen is going to be the one who's going to do our kickoff to our series, and she's going to spend the time really sharing a lot of her insights and experiences with this particular topic. I will be sort of doing a lot of the chatting and the talking and the presenting during our second webinar in the series. But I did want to take a moment and just orient you to some of what we're doing here. We want to just take about 50 to 60 minutes of time to really talk through sort of little nuggets of trauma, and that's what we're doing here. And really think about how can we do this practice in a new and different way? How can we dive deep in things that dive deep and talk about things that we don't often get to spend time on. Our today's presentation is going to be Jen mostly talking at you and with you, but there may be other formats that we do differently in the future. You can share things in the chat. I think I got a message that the chat was disabled. We're going to see if we can enable that, but we're not going to be taking questions today live, but we do want to hear from you. So either put them in the Q&A piece, because I did get a question, and we can that way compile questions and respond to them in sort of an intentional way. And that gets to the second piece of this, is that this webinar is live, and we're so happy that so many of you are here, but we had like hundreds more sign up, and we knew that probably many weren't going to be able to make it. Each of our webinars is going to be hosted live on Barry's webpage in the School of Social Work under the Trauma Responsive Webinar Series. So about a week from or so from now, you're going to be able to access this webinar as well as a tip sheet and resources. So anything that comes up today, we may be able to sort of pull into our tip sheet, pull into our resources. So that's sort of the way we're doing things now. May evolve over time. You're with us at the very beginning of our journey. So we'll all see how things evolve over the year. But that's how things are going to go today. I'm super excited to listen to what Jennifer has today. I learned so much from her all the time. I think we can learn so much from each other. So I'm going to be a big listener today rather than talker, but I'm really excited to be able to talk with you in some of our upcoming webinars. And thank you all for just being here and for caring about this topic and caring about becoming more trauma responsive in your work. Thanks.
Awesome, Ashley, thank you so much. And I also want to introduce Azalea. She is a wonderful DSW graduate assistant that we have that has such valuable experience. And so she's going to be helping us today with the Q&A and the questions, if you're able to put that in there. The other thing I just want to piggyback on what Ashley was saying was a little bit about the purpose of our webinar series. And certainly while we want to highlight our DSW and our curriculum at Barry, what truly inspired us to create these sessions today was this idea of building a community. We really wanted to have a space for us to be able to come together, to share, to support, share knowledge, and even foster collaborative learning. Because what we're really wanting to do, what we're really aiming to do is just provide a space where we can explore trauma responsive techniques, maybe even exchange ideas and promote these interventions that we know really are going to be making a difference. We know that some of you folks come here with enormous amount of experience and skills in some of these modalities. And some of you may not have even heard of those. So it's just an opportunity for us to get more of the knowledge out there and get more people interested in this work that will help our clients so well. All right, so with that being said, let's move on. Let's talk about psychological flexibility. So what is psychological flexibility? I'll give you a definition. But what I do want to say is that psychological flexibility, as most of you are aware, has originated from what's called acceptance and commitment therapy. It's actually stated ACT, not ACT. It's pronounced ACT. And the concept of this does show up in many trauma responsive interventions. You'll see the concept of psychological flexibility, even though it became very popular with Stephen Hayes and his colleagues. You'll see things in DBT, MBSR, trauma-focused CBT, narrative exposure therapy, and you'll even see it in somatic experiencing. So while the interventions themselves vary in, the different specific techniques and even the theoretical underpinnings of them, what they do share is a common goal of promoting psychological flexibility as the key component of an effective trauma treatment. So what does Stephen Hayes and his colleagues say? Psychological flexibility, quite simply, is the ability to cope, with, to accept, and to adjust to changing circumstances and challenges. So we're going to be talking about psychological flexibility. You may be familiar, though, with some other terms. How about emotional agility, or cognitive flexibility, or adaptive coping, resilience, mindful awareness, flexibility of thought, all of that. All of that is very similar. So we're going to be talking more about that. So even though it is connected to ACT, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how that shows up in ACT, please remember that even if you've not learned that, the concept of this really does exist in other modalities. Okay. Why is psychological flexibility so important? I see it as a superpower. It's like having a superpower through really tough times. I tell my clients this all the time. It is about being able to manage your emotions wisely. It's about being able to make decisions based on what really matters to you, your values, what's important to you, rather than just going and responding and reacting. And for those of you who are familiar with neurobiology, and maybe you've even had me in the neuro class, you understand that what happens when we experience stress, and it shuts down that prefrontal cortex. When we have psychological flexibility, it allows us, and we'll talk about it here in a second, to sort of just have an expanded window of tolerance and be able to still have our prefrontal cortex online. So, it's, and I say this to my clients, imagine you're facing a real major challenge in your life. Maybe like a career shift or some sort of personal crisis. When you are psychologically flexible, you are less likely to get overwhelmed by the stress. You're less likely to get overwhelmed by that anxiety, by the sadness. In essence, your prefrontal cortex stays online. And so because of that, you're better able to adapt and adapt smoothly. You're able to be more resilient. You're able to bounce back more effectively. And it's especially true for those who've gone through trauma. That flexibility is even more crucial. Why? It helps you to think clearly. It helps you to regulate your emotions better. It helps to prevent those overwhelming feelings from taking over, from working from the bottom up versus the top down, right? And so this is also why we decided to start with psychological flexibility first, because we understand that the importance of this is when we accept your thoughts, when you accept your feelings. And in mindfulness, they call it equanimity, being able to sort of hold both together at the same time. That's when you sort of avoid getting caught up in any sort of negative escalation instead of finding other ways to cope, right? So it's not just about your mind, it's about your body as well. It's the mind and body connection. And when we stay psychologically flexible, it means that your body can stay relaxed, and that it's physiologically harder to feel stressed, because it is physiologically impossible to experience stress in a relaxed body state. When we talk about that physiology, that means that pushing through, getting you into that stress response, the pushes of cortisol and adrenaline, although cortisol is a good thing to have. but it's physiologically impossible to experience stress in a relaxed body state. So that when we are psychologically flexible, think about it as a tool, another tool in our toolkit that helps us to navigate ups and downs, and it allows us to navigate through those ups and downs with ease and with strength. Okay. All right. So this leads me to the window of tolerance. Perhaps you've heard of the window of tolerance. Imagine the window of tolerance is like your comfort zone. That's the range where you feel okay. You can handle things. You can handle life's ups and downs, and you can handle them without feeling overwhelmed. When we experience trauma, it overwhelms our resources. It overwhelms our ability to cope, right? So if we can have a really widened window of tolerance, then we're able to be in that place of equanimity. We're able to go, I'm really upset right now. I probably, that person cut me off. I probably shouldn't, ride up on top of them. I probably shouldn't do this. I probably shouldn't scream obscenities. It's not safe. It's not that. You're able to make that decision. You're able to, we'll talk about and sort of getting through this whole presentation right now. Dan Siegel says, name it to tame it. Identify it. I'm really pissed off. I'm really angry. I'm really hurting right now. And in order for us to do that, when we have to have an expanded window of tolerance. So the more psychological flexibility we have, the more widened our window of tolerance window is. It gives you the skills to manage your stress, to manage your emotions. And then more importantly, make those decisions based on your values. Okay. So we're going to have an entire webinar on window of tolerance. If you're interested, we're going to be doing that in September. So make sure to check back then. But I couldn't go on talking about this without first popping in that really important piece of window of tolerance. Okay. All right, let's move on to building this psychological flexibility. As I told you, I mean, yes, we've seen this through other techniques. We know that it's called these other pieces. But first, I want to just allow us to review a little bit of what ACT says. So before we get to those strategies, and we'll go over those 5 strategies, I know that's what you came for. Let's just break down what acceptance and commitment therapy is and what that little Hexaflex model is about, because that's what Hayes says builds psychological flexibility. All ACT is about process. It's all about the processes. You do certain things, certain key things, and that will naturally reinforce the others. So when you work on one aspect of psychological flexibility, like being in the present moment, or accepting your thoughts and feelings without judging them, you're likely to improve those other areas as well. So it's this very holistic approach to well-being. All right, there's core concepts of this, and I just put this on here so you can take a look. The first one is to promote present moment awareness and acceptance. Basically, what that means is just being mindful and really grounded right now, here in the present. The idea is that suffering occurs when I think about the future, I catastrophize, or I think about the past, right? Being mindful. And then I put in their acceptance into the first piece. It really is its own other little separate piece. And that's just accepting that the thoughts and the feelings are as they are, without trying to change them, without trying to suppress them. Utilizing cognitive diffusion techniques, that's about loosening the grip on the thoughts and the feelings so they don't control your actions. Values, identifying what is important to you, living your life according to what really, really matters. practicing self as context, that's seeing yourself as the observer of your experiences rather than being totally defined by them. Okay, I think I covered them all. And then, of course, committed action. That means you've got to take the steps to do it. You've got to take those steps to move forward. So the more that you engage in these pieces, that's how you're going to build your psychological flexibility. Let me just take a look at the time here. Perfect. I thought one of the best ways, before we get to the techniques, some of the best ways to show psychological flexibility in the clinical realm is to kind of talk about a client. And I'm going to use a client of mine. We're going to call her Emma. Okay. So let me just tell you for a minute about Emma. She's a 34-year-old woman who went through a really tough time last year. And she was in a really traumatic car accident that had a deep impact on her life. And since then, she's been grappling with symptoms of PTSD. She's been having intense anxiety, flashbacks, some avoidance behaviors, not wanting to drive. Really, the avoidance behaviors had a lot to do with just not wanting to drive. So it's gotten to the point where she can't even be a passenger in the car. It's too overwhelming for her. It's affected her daily routine. It's affected her environment. It's affected the way she feels in terms of her independence. So in our initial sessions together, what we did is Emma really just kind of sat with what was there. And she opened up about feeling completely trapped with this trauma. And she found it hard to talk about the accident. She started having the nightmares, and just thinking about getting into a car. So let me walk through with you what were some of the techniques that really worked for her. And then I'm going to take you folks through 5 strategies that will help you to build your own psychological flexibility and how you can actually do that with your clients. Okay. So let's just talk about first what I did with Emma. And that is enhancing that present moment awareness, what I specifically did. So first of all, there's mindful breathing. And any of you folks that know, when you work with trauma responsive interventions, you're going to see that grounding techniques and self-regulation are a key component of those, right? So because Emma's been dealing with a lot of anxiety and a lot of those intrusive thoughts since her car accident, what I did was introduce just shifting focus to her breath. And I'd have her just sit comfortably, close her eyes if she felt comfortable. You know, of course, if you do mindfulness, if you do that deep breathing, especially those who've experienced trauma, you never want to tell them to close their eyes. You want to invite them to do that if they feel safe. Otherwise, just look down over the bridge of their nose and find one spot in front of them so that they're not distracted in any way, right? That it's always about letting the client feel that they're in control. So I had her sit comfortably, invited her to close her eyes, and then really tune into the sensation of breathing. Just tuning in, feeling that sensation, breathing in and out. And when the scary thoughts and feelings would pop up for her, I would invite her to just acknowledge them gently. Acknowledge them and bring them back to the breath. The brain is a muscle like any other muscle in the body, folks, right? And you have to train it. You have to be consistent. You have to apply action. You have to do that every day to build those neural pathways. And so the more often you do it, the easier it becomes. So just inviting the client in the space with you, hopefully they're feeling safe, to just go into their internal experience, and anytime the negative emotions come up, go back to the breath. Over time, she found that she was able to do this. She was better able at being in that present moment without letting those anxious thoughts take over. And it started to help her to really accept those overwhelming emotions. All right, now there was, let's go on to the expansion. I also did an expansion exercise. We'll talk about that in a second. I'm going to take us through an expansion exercise. Is actually one of the strategies that I'm going to have us doing. And that was one of the best ones for Emma when the flashbacks started to kind of creep up and creep in. And I'd have her, we'll talk about it in a minute, but I'd have her close her eyes and visualize her body expanding and creating this huge space around that feeling of anxiety. And sort of like making room for it instead of pushing it away. And when she did that, she imagined that anxiety as a tiny little thing, something that was actually very manageable for her within that vast space that she created. She was actually able then to really start accepting and making space for her anxiety. That's what made it more manageable. All right. So let's delve now into another technique that I used with Emma. And that was tackling her intrusive thoughts and the anxiety. I used with her to what's called in ACT a cognitive diffusion technique. Now, all of these, remember in that Hexaflex model, all of those things are helping to build psychological flexibility. So we understand that it's not just one easy little thing. It's something that we have to be committed to, and that all of those pieces allow us to have an expanded window of tolerance, which allows us to be more psychologically flexible. Okay. So one of the interventions that I used, I'm going to give you those steps here, is something called the curious scientist. So she had been really struggling with her thoughts about the car accident. And when she'd think about that, it would amp up her anxiety and it would make her want to avoid these situations, right? So what I did is I introduced Emma to a metaphor. Metaphors are big in ACT. Metaphors are big with psychological flexibility. I use metaphors all the time. Where Emma sees herself as a scientist studying the thoughts. So instead of getting caught up in them, she observes them. Like, I notice I'm having that thought that I'm going to have another accident. It's about being curious and exploring those thoughts without immediately, being judgmental or reacting to them. This takes practice. So over time, she was able to get a little bit more detached view of this. A little bit more detached view, and being able to see and observe her thoughts with curiosity, which allowed her to lose some of that emotional intensity that she had. Okay. All right. Then we have also something else called committed action. And this is where I used an exercise called the sweet spot. This one's all about clarifying what really matters to Emma, her core values. So remember I said earlier that when we are psychologically flexible and we have an expanded window of tolerance, that we're better able to respond based on what our values are, right? Than just sort of going from the amygdala and the stress response. So part of that is understanding what is important to us. What is that? So like I said, I'm going to take us through this in the strategies. But what I did was I guided her to different parts of her life, like relationships and career and her own personal growth, even her health. And what I had her do was categorize them as important, not important, stay healthy. You know, folks, I do this also within the assessment. And just as many of us, you know, over the years, depending on when you graduated from graduate school, mine was a long time ago, we didn't really learn about this. We did a biopsychosocial. Really, the biological component of that had very little to do with the biological components we ask today, right? Like before it was, you know, when's the last time you had, you know, a medical workup? Is there any history in the family of blah, blah, blah? Now we do it a lot differently, right? And a lot of us are including trauma assessments of looking at various parts of their life into the assessment. And if you're looking at strengths assessments as well, this might be something that you could also embed within your assessment of finding out what is important to her and to sort of rank them. I'm big on SUD scales. I do a lot of EMDR, so I ask them to do that too, but you can just say, is it important, not important, very important? So have them identify those values. And then once those are identified, then you can align them with the actions. Okay, so that's called the sweet spot. We're going to go into that in just a second here. So this is a good place now to just sort of shift. And here's what we're going to do in the next 25 minutes or so. We're going to go over each. I've got 5 strategies here. We're going to go over each of these strategies. What I have done here and what we will put on the tip sheet when we post this for you, we may email it to you, so stay tuned. But it will definitely be posted with the video, is what these different strategies are. Now, you folks are clinicians. So I'm going to take you through this and what that is like for yourself. But I'm sharing with you how to approach this. So what are these actual strategies? What would you do with your clients? Okay. All right. So the first one of these is mindful breathing. Very, very basic, similar to what I did with Emma. Okay. So let's delve into this for a minute. We all breathe. And it's a really, really powerful tool to help you stay in the present moment. It's a powerful tool to help you to ease stress and to build your resilience in handling those tough emotions. So, what I've added here for you throughout these 5 strategies, folks, on the right side, I've added those steps for you that you would take with your clients. And so when I say introduction, that's where you're kind of selling what you're selling this, right? You're marketing it a little bit. You're introducing the purpose of the exercise to the client so that they're really buying into what it is you're selling there. And then you take them through the steps until it goes all the way down to reflection and discussion. So let's do this together here for a minute, okay? And I'll pretend I'm the client and I'll take you through this. So I'm at the introduction part. I want you to imagine that you're feeling stressed. I want you to imagine that you're feeling anxious. There is a technique that we can use that's called mindful breathing, and that can help you. And it's all about finding a quiet space where you can sit comfortably. And if you can't find a quiet space, a mostly quiet space where you can just be within yourself with not being completely distracted. And what I'm going to have you to do is to just make sure that your feet are flat on the floor and that your hands are nicely rested in your lap or by your side. And if it feels right to you, you can gently close your eyes or just simply soften your gaze and look down over the bridge of your nose and find a fixed point in front of you. let's start by relaxing a bit. And I want you to just take a nice deep breath in through the nose, filling your lungs completely, and then exhaling slowly through your mouth, letting go of any tension, any tightness. Now I want you to bring your attention to your breath and notice that the air flows in and out of your body. You can feel your chest rise and fall with each breath, or just focus on the sensation in the nostrils. And now I'd like for you to start silently counting your breaths. Inhale, silently count 1. Exhale, and count 2. Keep counting each inhale and exhale to the number 10. If your mind starts to wander, which by the way happens to all of us, just gently guide it back to your breath and begin counting again. Remember, this is all about observing your thoughts without judgment. If you notice your mind is drifting to other things, it's completely okay. Just acknowledge those thoughts and gently bring your focus back to the breath. No need to be hard on yourself. Keep it going for a couple minutes more. Just stay connected to your breath, counting each inhale and exhale. And if you find yourself distracted, just come back to the breathing and the counting. And as we wrap up, I want you now to slowly bring your awareness back to the room. And tune in and pay attention to how your body feels. The sensation of sitting in the chair. Take one more deep breath in. Whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. And then we discuss it. We talk about what the experience is. What was that experience for you? How did it feel to focus on your breath? Did you notice any changes in your thoughts? Did you notice any changes in your emotions? And, many times when this first happens with my clients, they'll, often say, it was very challenging. I wasn't able to do that. I'm not understanding how this is in any way possible, related to me being able to drive again. And so that's good. That's why you want to reflect. You want to have a conversation and bring them back to understanding. Do a little psychoeducation on the window of tolerance. Do a little psychoeducation on what happens to the brain. We know that when we are in that trauma experience, more than 95%, some I've even seen 99% of the right hemisphere lights up, with almost none happening in the left side. That left side is that part that we're able to critically analyze. And so what trauma responsive interventions do is they allow for integration. So it's sort of, in essence, pulling out the trauma from the right into the left. So it's not uncommon for our clients to go, huh? I was right there, back in there again. This is crazy. So allow them, give them patience, give them an experience, give them an education, and help them to understand that if you continue to do this, this is a muscle you're going to build that is going to allow you to be more psychologically flexible. Good. All right, let's go on to our second strategy. Looking at the time here. Let's delve into clarifying your values. And it really is all about going deeper and getting a deeper understanding into what matters most to you in life. What really, really matters to you. And we may think right away, oh, we know what that is. It's my faith. It is my family. It's my child. But that also might allow us to delve a little deeper and to go a little deeper specifically. I always tell my clients, let's peel away the layers of this onion. Like that came very quickly to you. So for sure, those are definitely your values. I'm wondering if we can maybe go a little deeper and find a little bit more. So this is spending some time, again, I like to do this in assessment, where you become really clear, have a very clear sense of what your values are, because it then becomes easier to make decisions. And it becomes easier to navigate through our challenges once we're very clear with what our values are. That allows us to have greater resilience. It allows us folks to be more authentic, to have a greater authenticity. All right. So what do? We set the stage first. We set the stage. And I say it like this. Imagine bringing to your mind a memory that really captures the sweetness and richness of life for you. And you folks can do this now. It could be a moment filled with love, achievement, connections, or even just a simple pleasure. And so just close your eyes and try to make this memory as vivid as possible. And allow yourself to feel all the emotions that come with it. And hey, if sadness sneaks in, that's okay. And now I would say, let's share that memory. We can't do that together here, but this is what I would say to my client. Describe it as if it's happening right now to me. I want you to share it to me, with me. What do you see? What do you hear? I'm wondering if you can really paint that picture using your words. We also get some good data from this as well. Because if they're only able to be in their right hemispheric piece, what we're also doing here, folks, is we're inviting them to integrate. Okay. So you're back into that wonderful memory here, that sweetness, that richness of life to you. What do you see? What do you hear? Put words to it. And then take a moment to reflect. What does that memory reveal to you about what really matters most to you in the world? What personal qualities were you embodying in that moment? Sometimes I'll hear, I'm a really good active listener. I'm really good at holding the space for others. Haven't quite found that person that can hold the space for me in the same way, but I'm really good at doing that for others. So that seems like it's really important to you. What are the personal qualities that you were embodying in that moment? How were you treating yourself? How were you treating others? How are you treating the world around you? And then you invite your clients to think about what that memory suggests about how you want to live your life moving forward. How can you align your actions with those values? What behaviors, what decisions would reflect those core values? And, you know, look, remember when you were in school and we'd share theory, you'd go and learn about the theory. And then hopefully you had a professor that would go, all right, folks, this is best practice. This is best clinical social work practice theory. And if you lived on perfect hill, in perfect world, in perfect land, this is how it would look, but we don't. So you need to go out into the field and you need to do some field work. But hey, you know that license exam you're going to take? We're going to pretend that you live in perfect world and that's where you're going to take the answers from, not really, you know, the real world over here. What ends up happening through our life is we're having all of these experiences. And sometimes we forget and we push away what really is most important for us. And it might just be good for you to slow down and ask your clients, and don't just quickly go over it. Sit and pause and listen. And, you know, I tell my clients all the time, and maybe I should, this is being recorded, so maybe I shouldn't say this, but I do. Sometimes I'm more interested in, I'm less interested in what they have to say and what they're feeling, because the emotions are running the show. And so if something, an answer comes to them very quickly, that's data. But it's usually, we need to peel away the layer and go a little deeper because there's usually some other stuff under there. And that's where we have to get very skilled at holding that space, reading the nervous system of the client in front of us, and being able to go, I heard you. Now let's go a little deeper. Let's see if there are other values that are important to you. Because it might not be the ones that come very quickly to them. Pause. Have them clarify their values. Because that's what's going to help them to really make different decisions rather than working from autopilot. And go, you know what? I've always just been putting fire after fire out. I'm doing this thing and that thing and that thing and that thing. And I'm not realizing, you know, I've been so used to just making sure that I make a living that I'm forgetting that what's most important to me is being a really present parent. Oh my gosh. So the more that we get very clear with what our values are, the more targeted we can be with our intervention. And that's going to help to build that psychological flexibility and resilience. Thought labeling. Let's explore this one. It's a really powerful concept. Oops, I need to fix the PowerPoint. I'll fix that before we post it. All right. This is where I was talking to you folks about Dan Siegel's Name It to Tame It, right? That thought labeling, it reminds me of that. This is what helps separate ourselves from our thoughts and our emotions. So it gives us that space to interpret them in a healthier way. Naming our thoughts, okay? So what is it? It's a method where we identify and we name them without judging them. Anger, frustration, jealousy, empathy. Because when we do that without judging them, we're creating that space and that distance. And when we create that distance and that space, that's where we reduce their emotional impact, which allows us to have a greater psychological flexibility. So you'll simply explain that to your clients. And then you will invite them to notice their thoughts and feelings. And you'll say, I invite you to go right now inward and just notice what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and observe them without trying to change anything. It's just about being aware and mindful of the internal experience. And then you practice labeling those. You might say it silently to yourself. You might say it out loud. I notice that I'm having the feeling that whatever that is. I notice that I'm having the feeling that I'm not good enough. I notice that I'm having anxiety in my chest. I see the image of me failing this test. So you want to tell your clients to remember to use the phrase, I notice. I notice. And then of course you want to reflect on that. You practice it a few minutes and then you ask them quite simply, how did it feel to observe your thoughts in that way? Did you notice any changes? Did you notice how you perceived those thoughts and feelings? We have then the curious scientist. So let me just go over, because I sort of went over the curious scientist as well before. Good, I'm doing okay on time. This is again about observing your thoughts and feelings with curiosity. So for those of you who have done mindfulness, you can see that a lot of these are very mindfulness techniques, right? Aware and just being aware of looking at this with a curiosity. What that can do is it can significantly boost your psychological flexibility. So just as I shared with you about Emma, what do? We step inside the role of a curious scientist. And it's sort of like our own mental laboratory. Instead of reacting to our thoughts and feelings, we observe them. So you just imagine yourself in that calm and safe laboratory. This is your space to explore. It's your space to take a look at your inner experiences freely, without any sort of pressure, without any sort of expectation. These are exercises, folks, that are important if you're going to be doing this to build psychologically, perhaps your own psychological flexibility. You want to find others that can help to hold that space for you. And so if you're going to be doing this with your clients, it's important that you do this yourself, because your nervous system is going to be connecting and talking to the nervous system in front of you, right? So you allow them to be mindful. You allow them to just bring up that image of being in the lab and just taking a moment to notice what those thoughts and those feelings and emotions are. It's all about non-judgment. And so just simply acknowledge whatever it is that comes up. Then you label it. You be aware, you label that, and then what you do is you explore. You move on and you explore the sensations that go on with those thoughts. If any of you do EMDR, you'll notice some stuff in here of what I'm saying, right? You've got to bring forward the emotion. You've got to bring forward those words that they made about themselves as a result of the worst part of that experience. Maybe in the other exercise, if those of you are familiar with HeartMath and heart coherence, finding that nice sweet spot going in, that's very much the same thing. You'll see variations on a theme. And they all have to do with building and expanding our window of tolerance and building our psychological flexibility. Okay. So we label it, we explore it as a curious scientist. Then we go back and reflect on it, right? What was that like for you? What did you notice? What came up for you? Just share without judgment. And without judgment means that you folks, as you're receiving that, you have to be careful of your nonverbal communication, right? So if they say something, you want to be very cautious that, if you're saying that it's not, don't judge in here, and you go, or, oh, wow, that's funny. You know, you need to be sort of a neutral canvas, right? So if you're going to be saying that you can't, don't judge, you don't judge either, be very cautious of that. Hold that space for them as a neutral place. And then as we talk about in all trauma responsive interventions is really that integration, right? So how for this integration, think about how you can apply this when you're looking to have a curious and accepting sort of attitude in your daily life. How might you navigate through challenges more effectively? So let's pick one up. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about a challenge that exists in your life and how we can use this to help that, and you take them through. And then, of course, you close that up and you invite them to adopt that curiosity. And then finally, the expansion exercise, which really is one of my favorite ones. It's also a very powerful exercise. What this one is designed to do is to develop skills of acceptance and emotional regulation. The more expanded your window of tolerance, I keep bringing that in, the more psychologically flexible you are. The more you're able to emotionally regulate yourself, the more psychologically flexible you are. That's why you see these strategies have a lot to do with mindfulness, just because it's ACT, which is brings in a lot of those mindfulness components. But you can see that all throughout the different interventions. If you work with kids, if you work with kids in sports, psychological flexibility is huge. You're a better athlete if you are psychologically flexible, right? My daughter plays volleyball, so I'm talking with her about this all the time. All right, you missed that ball. What you gonna do? Are you gonna sit and cry and whine and say, see, now I've missed this many things and I'm a terrible person and give that negative stuff? Or are you gonna shake it off, take some deep breaths, and train yourself? I got the next one. That positive talk. You want to build psychological flexibility with kids and athletes as well if you work with athletes. All right. So the expansion exercise is about creating, expanding, and creating that space, just as I put on here, right? About learning to make space for the emotions and the sensations. So you introduce that to them. You find that comfortable position, right? You bring them through that guided relaxation, just similar to what we've done before. You have them identify those thoughts and feelings. And then you imagine, as I told you with Emma, what you imagine them do is you're expanding the area all around the emotion and sensation. And you picture it like you're creating a bigger space around it, like a cloud in a vast sky. A lot of metaphors and imagery here. And you notice that the sensation may shift as you continue to breathe. And then you allow the person to stay in that presence. And if the mind starts to wander, you bring it back. You conclude it, and then you reflect on that. So what are some key points that we went over here, folks? What we talked about today is we defined what psychological flexibility is, how it's important for our emotional well-being, those 5 practical strategies, and we looked at how those were applied through the case with Emma, and recognizing our time here and going through that. I just wanted to share, really wanted to thank you folks. I really do hope that this session provided you with some really valuable insights, maybe some tools, maybe get you a little excited, delve a little deeper into some of the things that you know about. Maybe you want to go back and take a look at that. But really, psychological flexibility is about bouncing back, being more resilient, and being able to expand the emotional well-being. So our next series is you can join us Wednesday, July 24th. If you're interested in delving deeper into therapeutic presence and co-regulation, join us for that. Ashley's going to be taking us through that. And like I said, we're going to be posting this on our website. So thank you, folks. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for your participation. I look forward to connecting with you all again.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Have a wonderful week, month.
Thanks.
See you soon.